So from the cow side, we're now moving on to the bull side. Mike already referred to the bulls sometimes being guilty, so I'm very curious to hear about the bull soundness, bull breeding soundness story here. First, yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to talk this morning. I'm talking about the results of an investigation we did into dairy herd bull breeding soundness management in Tasmania, Australia. I suppose I come from a practitioner background. I'm not a researcher. I work in general practice, and I suppose the reason for our project was to look at what part bulls played in our fertility issues in Australia. We all knew that bulls play an important part in our systems. Typically in our area, our farmers AI for between 5 and 7 weeks, and then they'll put the bulls in for another sort of 5 to 8 to 9 weeks after that. And so with the declining fertility of the Australian dairy herd, we really want to know, is there increasing pressure on our bulls? Are we relying on them more to get cows in calf? And really there was a lot of information lacking on dairy bulls. There's been a lot of work done in Australia on the beef bull situation, but there's not been a lot done on dairy bulls. So we really wanted to see if there is information that we could find out, and should dairy vets be doing a better job, which was the reason for our project. So how was the project conducted? We selected dairy farms, randomly selected, and really it came down to whether they were happy for us to test their bulls and to also undertake a questionnaire. All bulls on the properties had to undergo a VBBSE, which is a veterinary bull breeding soundness examination, which is a standardised testing procedure we use in Australia. And then they had to complete a full reproductive questionnaire for the same season. And then we analysed all the results of these bull breeding soundness examinations, and we collected the questionnaires and analysed those as well. So the herds, just for you who don't know, a quick geography lesson. We've got Australia, wrong one, Australia there, and we were looking down the little part down in the bottom of Tasmania, and this nicely was one of our bulls that we had, which had a nice map of Tasmania on his head, and we were right up in the northwest corner up here, so that's where we're looking. So it's one of the key dairy areas in Australia, and Victoria being the other big dairy area in Australia. So we picked 16 herds. Really it came down to budget as to how many herds we selected, and there were 221 bulls on those herds. Our herds, the herd sizes range from 180, which is quite a small herd in our area. Really, our herd average is sitting around the 400 to 500 mark, so it was a small herd. Our biggest herd was around the 940 cows. And we've got a mixture. We're very seasonal where we are. We don't have too many split calving herds like Andrew just mentioned. We're very seasonal. Our calving herds are either strictly autumn or strictly spring, and that breakdown there sort of demonstrates that most of our herds are still spring herds. AI period, as I said, vary between 4 weeks and 7 weeks, with the average 39 days, and our total mating period for the herds averaged out about 11 weeks. So these herds were pretty standard herds for our area in part of Australia where we are. We're very closely aligned to the New Zealand system. A bit of a breakdown on the bulls. We have a lot of Jersey bulls in our area, mainly because the Jersey bulls are used to mate our heifers, so a lot of farmers will keep those Jersey bulls and then use them in their cow herd as well, because they're not actually keeping the calves out of those, they're keeping calves out of just the AI mated animals. So the bulls are really just used to clean up and get the cows and calf at the end. So there was a fairly high proportion of Jersey bulls, as you can see. And then all those bulls were submitted for a VBBSE 1 to 2 months prior to use. And as I said, it's a very standardised method of examining bulls in Australia, and it's been used over a lot of years now. And it involves a general physical examination, so looking at the eyes, body condition scoring, gait, lameness, feet and conformation. The reproductive examination, which is internal palpation of sexual organs there, also testicular palpation and management, and also we look at the penis and visualise that to make sure there's nothing going on there. And then another big part of it is collecting semen via electroejaculation, and we do a crush site examination of that, looking for colour concentration, gross motility and forward progressive motility, and then we also send it off to a laboratory looking at live dead, staining and then also morphology. So then we summarised for the farmers in a report, and we categorised into 3 areas, which is part of our examination through the cattle vets. We have fail or cross animals, qualified animals, which are ones that we would not use in single size situations, or they'll be used with stipulations, and then we have a tick or a pass, and that's how they'll divide it up. And so results of the examinations, we found that 23% of the bulls were found to be high-risk bulls. So these bulls were ones that we would not recommend using at all throughout the breeding period. And another 26% of those bulls were given a qualified result. So these were bulls that may have had slight penile problems, or bulls that were between 60 and 70% normal morphology. So they were underneath our 70% cutoff, but given we would normally put those bulls and say they're okay to use in multi-size situations. So nearly 50% of our bulls were at a high risk of subfertility, which was quite a shock for everyone, I think, when we first did this. Looking at differences in breed results, there wasn't really anything significant there. So Jerseys and Friesians, a lot of people blame Jerseys and say or say Jerseys are really good. You're either in the Jersey camp or the Friesian camp, but there was no real difference between the 2 breeds. And then we looked at the risk areas as to why these bulls failed. And the main area that they failed was semen, and semen morphology was the highest risk area, which is, I suppose, something that we thought may be the case, but it really showed out highly in this project that, morphology was the main risk area. Penile problems were the second highest risk area, and semen motility was the third highest. And for those of you who are into morphology, the main defects in the morphological problems were mid-piece problems, and then head defects were the second highest. That's just a bit of a graph. So you can just see on that graph there, this whole 3/4 of the problems were really due to either semen morphology, penile problems, or semen motility were the big ones where bulls fail. As part of it also, we had the questionnaire on bulls, and this was really used to get a bit of a gauge as to what was happening to these bulls, and whether there were things we should be doing in our management of bulls to improve the situation. And average bull rate being used was around the 2.74%. We sort of aimed for 3% in our herd, so it wasn't too far off that. In the heifers, it was a lot higher, obviously, because farmers often had a lot more bulls that they threw into the heifers first and then dragged them back for the cows. A couple of surprising things, I suppose, that bulls, 81% of herds use bulls that are only less than 2 years of age, and that was a little bit of a worry, I suppose. And there were still significant numbers of quite old bulls being used, which had probably dropped off in fertility as well. Most of our herds used the rotation program with the bulls, which was good. They were rotating, whether it was 3 bulls in and 3 bulls out, or using teams of bulls, so that was a good thing. But some of the other worrying things, I suppose, we found that most people kept their bulls, or half the people kept their bulls away from the dairy property when not in use, and only 13% of our our farms actually had their bulls back on farm ready to use for greater than a month, and a high proportion of bulls only arrived less than 2 weeks back on farm before they were going to be used, which was a bit of a worry. On bull health itself, vaccination wasn't done to a very high extent. Most bulls got a drench of some kind for worms, which probably was because it was easy and they could just run a paw on down their back. Trace elements, which we do need in our area, weren't used, less than 50% of herds. And not even all of our herds were ear-notching for BVD, which we're a bit disappointed about because we really do push that. But probably a good thing we found that was all our bull herds were actually observing their bulls at least twice daily, which was a good sign. So quickly to go through some discussions, I suppose, out of the study, we certainly identified high percentages of subfertile bulls, and most of these wouldn't have been found unless we did a full VBBSE. If we looked at these bulls in the yard and said, yep, they're in good condition and we're happy that they're going to do the job, then we would have been wrong because they didn't have the normal semen to do the job, or they had penile problems and that there to do it. And I suppose following on from that, we really decided an area that we really need to look after our bulls, dairy bulls, better. Certainly we could improve the rates of bulls that were used in herds, and we really need to ensure education was better on farms and that we were treating bulls like we do cows, and making sure they get all their trace elements and vaccinations, and making sure they were back on farm in time to actually do the job. and also looking at probably our bulls are a little bit too young in some cases as well. So what's happened since this project? We've really ramped up our education of dairy farmers on bull management in Australia, and Dairy Australia has been quite big in doing that. We've run a few webinars and training sessions for even vets as well about bull testing. Certainly there's been a huge increase in the amount of bull testing carried out on dairy farms around Australia now, and it's become nearly a routine part of the procedure. And there's also been an increased awareness of infertile bulls and how we can prevent them. And there's also been a couple of other further research projects which have been carried out. So Andy Hancock did a master's in doing a similar study to this one in Victoria, which was the other big dairy area, and found very similar results in the number of bulls failing. And also Rosemary Waite, who's here somewhere in the audience, she's in doing another project investigating dairy bull behaviour and also looking at characterising scrotal circumference and weight and onset of puberty, so we can sort of see if we can use some of these younger bulls and whether they will stack up, and also looking at genetic testing of these bulls to see if we can look at the genomics of herd bulls and selecting bulls a little bit better. And that's all, thank you. So thanks also to the farmers who were there, and also some of the Dairy Australia and Shannon Vet for sponsoring the project as well.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the floor? Yeah, I see you. Can you go to the mic behind you?
Andrew Sawyer. Has your increased bull testing, etc., actually resulted in improved fertility in the dairy herds? Because that's the bottom line. Yeah,
we did follow through and look at and some of these herds, and yes, I haven't got the actual figures here, but we certainly can't look at the AI period because they're not going to influence that period. So we need to look at the bull mating period, and yes, we have seen improvements in those herds. But I suppose what we have definitely noticed is that we have taken out the risk that is involved in having the disasters that happen. So most years in our area, we've got 60,000 cows in our area. We will have a significant number of herds where they'll have a disaster with their heifers, or they'll have a disaster that they'll get a lot of cows in calf day eye, and then they'll have nothing happening for the last 6 weeks of mating. And people at bull testing, we're eliminating that really risk. So I look at it, I suppose, as a risk management tool rather than saying we're going to dramatically improve fertility, because I think there's other things we can do on farms to help with that, but I think I use it as a risk management tool.
I think there was another question. Yeah.
Just a question on your bull breeding. Sorry, Bob Reinberger. On your bull breeding, did you follow any BBSE information through on the same bull on a yearly basis or on a monthly basis, or did you only just do them once and then put them out again and then just qualified them and left them?
In this project, we only did the bulls once. In Andy Hancock's project, he actually retested the bulls after the mating period, and he found that there was a lot of breakdown of those bulls during the mating period. But we do a lot of herds where we actually test those bulls every year, and we certainly find where a bull will pass 1 year and will fail the next year, and mainly due to semen problems, because obviously something's happened to that bull in the last 70 to 90 days and it's affected his semen production. So we certainly recommend testing before every season. And also we've got a couple of herds that farmers that split bulls and share bulls between autumn and spring mating periods on farms, and we test those bulls before the autumn joining and the spring joining, and there were certainly bulls which will pass in the autumn joining and then fail in the spring joining, so we certainly recommend that they test them before every mating period.
You don't test the bulls that fail and give them 6 to 8 weeks to recover and say maybe you're all right now? Once they fail, they fail. Depends on the timing of it, and if we've got time, and depending on what defects we've got. If we've got mid-piece defects, and then we'll probably give them another chance close to the time. But if we've got head defects, we probably won't have time to get them right before. Yeah. That's fair enough. Thank you very much.